I have always been the kind of person who apologizes before asking for help. That is just who I am. I grew up in a house where you did not want to be a burden, where asking for too much meant you got the look. The one my mother gave, when she was already calculating the cost of whatever you needed, before you even finished your sentence. I learned early on to manage on my own, to make myself small, to be grateful for what I got even when what I got was never quite enough. So when my doctor told me I needed surgery, my first instinct was not to worry about the procedure itself. It was to figure out how not to inconvenience anyone. I was 31 years old and I had been dealing with the pain for almost 2 years. Endometriosis. The word sounds clinical and distant until you are the one lying on the bathroom floor at 2 in the morning, gripping the cold tile because it is the only thing that feels real. My gynecologist at the Women's College Hospital in Toronto had been monitoring it for months, adjusting medication, trying to manage it conservatively. But by November of that year, she sat across from me and said the words I had been dreading: "We need to go in." The only available surgical slot she had, the only one that aligned with the specialist she wanted on the team, was the second week of February, February 14th, to be exact. I remember almost laughing when she said the date. My parents' 30th wedding anniversary trip to Mexico was booked for February 10th through the 17th. My brother and his wife had planned to join them. The whole family had been talking about it for over a year. My mother had a folder on her phone with hotel photos, restaurant reservations, a day trip to Chichen Itza. It had been paid for since the previous January. I told my doctor I would take it. There was no other option that made sense medically. The specialist's schedule was locked. My condition was worsening. Waiting another 3 or 4 months meant risking further complications. I left the clinic and sat in my car in the parking garage on Grenville Street for a long time before I drove home. That night I called my mother. I told her everything calmly. The diagnosis update, the surgical date, the reasons why it could not be moved. I was not asking them to cancel the trip. I want to be clear about that, because later they would say I had been manipulative, that I had timed it deliberately, that I had wanted them to choose. I was not asking them to choose anything. I was simply telling them what was happening in my life. I thought they would want to know. The silence on the phone lasted long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. Then my mother said, "Well, the tickets are non-refundable." That was the whole sentence. Non-refundable. I said I understood. I told her I would figure it out. I asked if maybe my brother could stay behind, just for the first day or two post-surgery, since his wife could still go with my parents. Another silence. He had already requested the time off work. It would be complicated. Maybe I could ask a friend. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed in my apartment in Hamilton, and I did not cry right away. I just looked at the wall for a while. The only person who called me back that night was my grandmother. She is my father's mother, 81 years old, and she lives in a townhouse in Mississauga with a garden she tends obsessively, and an opinion about everything, which she delivers without any particular concern for whether you wanted it. She had overheard the conversation apparently, because my father had been in the room when my mother told him, and my grandmother had been visiting for dinner. "I will be there," she said. No preamble, no asking if I needed her. Just, "I will be there." "Grandma, it's a 4-hour surgery. You don't have to." I said I will be there. "What time do you need to arrive?" I gave her the details. 7:30 in the morning, the surgical center on King Street West. She wrote it down. I could hear the pen scratching on paper, the way she always insists on writing things down even when her phone could do it for her. I told her she should not take the GO train that early in the morning. She told me not to tell her what to do. We said goodnight. I did not sleep well that week or the week after. The closer the date came, the more I found myself watching my phone, waiting for someone, my mother, my brother, anyone, to say something, to ask how I was feeling, to acknowledge that this was happening. My brother texted once to say he hoped it went smoothly. That was it, one text. My sister-in-law sent a thumbs-up emoji to a message I had sent about the preoperative instructions, which I had forwarded to the family group chat more out of habit than any real expectation. The night before the surgery, my grandmother drove up from Mississauga in her 2017 Civic and stayed at my apartment. She brought food, not restaurant food, real food, the kind that takes time, stuffed peppers and rice. She also brought a paper bag from the Shoppers Drug Mart near her house with anti-nausea ginger candies, lip balm, a small puzzle book in case I was bored during recovery, and a card that said, "Thinking of you" on the front because, she told me, she could not find one that said, "I'm furious on your behalf but I love you." I laughed for the first time in about 2 weeks. She slept in my bed and I slept on the pull-out couch because she has a bad back and I did not want her uncomfortable. She protested. I told her it was my apartment and my couch. She gave in, which tells you how tired she actually was. The surgery itself went as expected. 4 hours. The surgical team at the center was kind. I remember a nurse with red-framed glasses squeezing my hand before I went under, telling me I would be fine. I believed her. When I woke up in recovery, the first face I saw was my grandmother's. She was sitting in the chair beside the bed with her reading glasses on and her crossword puzzle book open, pencil in hand, completely focused, as though she was in her own living room. She did not make a fuss when she saw me wake. She just closed the book, set it on her lap, and said, "How do you feel?" "Like someone rearranged my insides," I said. "Yes, they did," she said. "Are you cold? I brought the good blanket." She had brought a blanket from home, a real one, packed it in her overnight bag. The next several days were hard in the way that post-operative recovery is always hard, but also in a different way that is harder to describe. The physical part, the discomfort, the limited movement, the medication schedule, that part I had prepared for. What I had not prepared for was the silence from the rest of my family. They were in Mexico. I had seen the photos on my mother's Instagram. The resort looked beautiful. There was a picture of my brother and his wife at sunset on the beach, arms around each other. There was a picture of my parents at a candlelit dinner, my mother in a blue dress I had never seen before, my father raising a glass of wine. There were pictures from the day trip, the ruins lit gold in the afternoon sun. Everyone looked happy and well. I do not begrudge them happiness, I want to make that clear. But not one of them called. My grandmother stayed with me for 5 days. She slept on the pull-out couch every night despite her back, and she drove me to my first follow-up appointment at the clinic on York Street. And she made sure I was eating, and she reminded me to take my medication at the correct intervals. And she watched 3 full seasons of a British baking competition with me, because I could not concentrate on anything with more narrative complexity. She did not complain. She did not make me feel like a burden. She just showed up and stayed. On the 4th day, my father sent a WhatsApp message, not a call, a message. It said, "Hope you're feeling better. Weather here is beautiful. Flying back Sunday." I read it 3 times. I put my phone face down on the coffee table. My grandmother, sitting across from me with her crossword puzzle, looked up over her glasses. "Who was that, Dad?" She looked at me for a moment. Then she looked back at her puzzle. I watched her write something down. She underlined it. I did not ask what she was writing. At the time, I assumed it was an answer to an across clue. It was not a crossword clue. I found this out 6 weeks later. My parents' 30th anniversary party was held on the first Saturday of April at a banquet hall in Oakville. It had been planned for months, rented space at a venue near the lake, about 70 guests, a sit-down dinner. My aunt had organized most of it. My brother's wife had done the flowers. I had before all of this agreed to give a toast. I almost did not go. My grandmother called me the week before and told me I should go. She did not explain why. She just said, "You should be there. Trust me." I had learned, over the past few months, that my grandmother's trust me carried more weight than almost anyone else's. I went. The evening started as these things do. Cocktail hour in the foyer, people catching up, my aunt managing the seating chart with quiet intensity. My parents were glowing. My mother wore a new dress. My father shook hands with everyone he saw. My brother and his wife were at a table near the front, laughing easily. I sat near the back, near my grandmother, and I smiled when I needed to smile and spoke when I was spoken to. The dinner was good. Salmon and roasted vegetables, warm rolls, a decent Ontario Riesling from a Niagara winery that I appreciated more than the occasion warranted. The toasts began after the main course. My aunt went first, then a family friend who had known my parents since university. Then my brother, who gave a speech full of inside jokes and warmth that the room loved. Then it was my turn. I stood up, I looked at my notes. I had written something careful and kind. The kind of speech that does not give anything away. The kind I had been writing in my head for weeks while lying on a pull-out couch waiting for the pain medication to kick in. I got through about 4 sentences before my grandmother stood up. I sat down. She was not supposed to speak. She was not on the program. My aunt looked at her from across the room with an expression of confusion and mild alarm. My grandmother adjusted her reading glasses, took a small notebook from her handbag, not her crossword book, a different one, a plain brown moleskine-style notebook I had never seen before, and she cleared her throat. "I want to say a few words," she said, "about what family means." The room quieted. She is the kind of person rooms quiet for, my grandmother. There is something in her manner, unhurried, certain, that makes people pay attention. She began by saying that my parents had built something real over 30 years and that she admired them for it. She said that enduring love is a rare thing and worth celebrating. The room relaxed. People picked up their wine glasses. Then, she said, I also want to talk about what happened in February. My mother's head turned. My grandmother opened the notebook. She had, it turned out, been keeping notes since November, since the night she overheard the phone call at my parents' house. She had written down dates, times, and the content of every message sent to and from our family group chat during the week before my surgery, and the week I spent recovering. She had screenshotted messages on her own phone. She had a record of exactly which days my parents and brother were in Mexico, cross-referenced with every day that passed without a call. She did not read all of it. She did not need to. She read enough. She read the text my father sent on day 4. She read the message my mother sent on day 6, which I had not mentioned yet because it came after my father's and said only, How are you holding up? Margaritas here are strong lol. She read my brother's single text from before the surgery. She read the date and time of the one phone call I received from a family member during my entire recovery, which was from my aunt, not from either of my parents on day 3, lasting 6 minutes and 20 seconds. She read all of this in a calm, even voice, the way she reads the news. The room had gone very still. I could hear the sound of the ventilation system and someone at a far table setting down a fork. My father said, Mom, this is not the place. It is the only place, she said, not unkindly, just factually. Because at every other place I have brought this up gently, I have been told it was a misunderstanding. That you were busy. That she understood. She did understand, my mother said. Understanding and being all right are not the same thing, my grandmother said. And I want the people who love this family to know what this family actually did. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard in a room full of people. My uncle, my father's brother, put down his wine glass slowly. His wife had tears in her eyes. Several of my parents' friends were staring at the table. My brother's jaw was tight. My sister-in-law was looking at her lap. Then one of my parents' oldest friends, a woman named Donna who had known my mother since they were in nursing school together, said quietly, from her table near the window, I had no idea. No, my grandmother said. Neither did most of you. My mother stood up and said something about this being unfair, about how things were being taken out of context, about how she was being made to look like a monster at her own anniversary party. My father put a hand on her arm. My brother said that Grandma had always had a flair for the dramatic. My grandmother looked at my brother for a long moment. Then she said, I raised your father. I know where the dramatic tendencies come from. It is not from me. There was a scattered, uncomfortable sound from the room. Not quite laughter, not quite anything. She sat down after that. She did not storm out. She did not escalate. She just sat down and folded her hands on the table and looked at me. And I looked at her, and something in my chest that had been wound tight for months loosened a little, not completely, but a little. The rest of the evening was what you would expect. Strained. The cake was cut. People said their goodbyes earlier than planned. My parents did not speak to me directly. My brother found me near the coat check and said, very quietly, that I had let Grandma embarrass the whole family, and I said, very quietly, that I had not done anything, which was true. He left without answering. My grandmother drove me home. We sat in her car in the parking lot for a while before she started the engine. Are you okay? She asked. I think so, I said. Are you? I am fine, she said. I have been wanting to do that for 4 months. I laughed. She looked satisfied. On the drive back along the QEW, with the lake dark on our left and the city lights coming up ahead, she told me something I have thought about many times since. She said that she had watched my father's family for 50 years. Had watched how they showed up and how they didn't. Had watched who got the benefit of the doubt and who was always expected to wait. She said she had been too quiet about it for too long, and that at 81 she had decided that patience was no longer her responsibility. Honesty was you deserved better, she said. Not just that month, for a long time. I did not say anything for a while. Outside, the highway signs blinked past. Burlington, Brampton, Mississauga. I know, I finally said. And I think that was the first time I had actually said it. Not just thought it, said it out loud, to another person in a car on the highway at 10 o'clock at night, with the heater running, and my grandmother's hands steady on the wheel. Things did not fix themselves overnight. They rarely do. My parents called me 2 weeks after the party, a joint call, which they almost never do, and my father said they were sorry for how it had looked, which is a different thing from being sorry for what they did, but I noted it. My brother and I have had a long, uncomfortable conversation that did not resolve much but cleared some air. My sister-in-law, to her credit, sent me a message that was genuinely kind, and I believed she meant it. My grandmother and I have lunch every other Sunday now. She brings food. I bring the good coffee. We sit in her garden when the weather allows, and she tends to her plants and gives me her opinions on things I did not ask about. And I have stopped minding. I have started to look forward to it. I am not the kind of person who ties things up neatly. That is not how healing actually works, and anyone who tells you otherwise is probably selling something. But I have stopped apologizing for needing things. I have stopped making myself small in rooms where I was always going to be the one who got less. I have stopped waiting for people to show up. The person who showed up for me, who drove down at 7 in the morning, who brought the good blanket, who took notes in a plain brown notebook because she knew, even when I did not, that the truth was going to matter eventually, was 81 years old and 4'11" in her good shoes. I do not take that lightly.